Hi, I'm Aaron Ashworth, the Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Programs Administrator for the Oklahoma Department of Veterans Affairs. I want to welcome you to our presentation, 5 Ways to Serve Military Service Members, Tech Education Edition. I hope you enjoy the presentation. I want to welcome you and introduce your presenters for today. My name is Aaron Ashworth. I'm the Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Programs Administrator for Oklahoma Department of Veterans Affairs. I want to also introduce Dr. Brent Montgomery, who is the State Approving Agency Administrator for the Oklahoma Department of Veterans Affairs as well, and he will bring the part of our presentation that is understanding military education benefits. As we get started today, our primary focus is going to be discussing some of the ways that you can assist your Oklahoma military SMVF community through their tech education. We're going to talk about understanding military culture, the importance of hearing the service member's story, what it means to be a connector and influencer, understanding military education benefits, as well as knowing some other local resources and benefits in your communities, and then ensuring follow-up care. First, we're going to start with understanding military culture. This is understanding basically military cultural framework as a whole, as well as understanding some of the phraseology and terminology that we use, such as SMVF. That conversation starts with understanding what SMVF stands for. A lot of times when we're talking with regards to service members, veterans, and their families, we use the term SMVF, which stands for exactly that. Service members are the SM, veterans are the V, and their families are F. So when I say SMVF communities, we're talking about service members, veterans, and their families. Why that's important is because not every service member's experience is the same. A service member's time in service, their operational locations, and other factors play into their status. Understanding certain criteria helps in identifying and explaining their benefits. So a lot of times when we talk about service members, veterans, and their families, there's clear distinctions between what those mean. And it plays into the eligibility, it plays into the importance of understanding holidays, the services and employment opportunities, deployment and redeployment, and also why it's important to ask the right question, which is ask the question, did you serve? When we talk about service members, a lot of times we're referring to anybody that has ever been in the military service. When we talk about veterans, a lot of times a veteran is identified as somebody who has gone overseas and spent an amount of time overseas in an operational setting and then returned. And then a family member being somebody who is a brother, sister, mom, dad, or relative to somebody that has been in the military service. Again, it's important to understand eligibility because a lot of times when we talk about eligibility for health benefits, education benefits, there's a clear distinction between service member and veteran. Service member might be somebody that has served 30 years but has never gone overseas. A lot of times their criteria and eligibility for specific programs are going to look different than somebody who has been a veteran and has gone over and fight in a war and come back. There's a lot of difference in eligibility versus active duty compared to our reserve and our National Guard service members. And those things differ, and it's important to understand why they differ and what is in what kind of eligibility criteria do they have to meet to be able to get into certain programs educationally or healthcare wise. It's also important to understand holidays. So from a civilian component, a lot of times when we recognize veterans, we have everyone stand up in a room. And a lot of times Memorial Day, we honor our veterans that are currently serving. It's important to really kind of understand the importance of these holidays. The Veterans Day is really for those who have gone overseas, fought in wars, and come back. Memorial Day is those who have sacrificed their life and have given their life and have currently passed. And to realize the importance of those, a lot of times when it's, I don't know, for instance, in the middle of Oklahoma, you might be at a church service on a Sunday, and the congregation says, well, everyone stand up if you ever served in the military. We want to honor you for Veterans Day. And a lot of times it makes those service members uncomfortable because they don't feel like they have the veteran status. They may have never gone overseas and fought in a war and come back. And it's important to understand those things. But it's important to understand that when they're going for health care benefits and they're having to fill out intake paperwork, or they're coming into school and they're having to fill out their information to come into school. And if we ask the question, are you a veteran? A lot of times some people don't identify as a veteran because they feel like, well, I've never gone overseas, I've never fought in a war. even though that they may have been in service for 10, 12, 30, 20 years. Like, it doesn't really matter the time frame. But they may not identify as a veteran. So a lot of times we ask that one of the best practices that you can do is ask the question, did you or a family member serve, versus are you a veteran? And did you serve will capture a lot more of the data and statistics of those that don't identify as a veteran but identify as a service member only. It's also good to understand why people serve. People generally join the service because they want to serve a higher purpose. They've had experiences that make them want to be able to reach out. They want to become more of who they were meant to be. They want to serve a higher purpose. They want to experience what it's like to serve a higher purpose. So people generally join because of purpose. But the reason people stay is because of the connections they make. They become friends with their battle buddies. They build good relationships within their squad and their platoon and in their units. And a lot of times that they won't get out of service, or they prolong their service a lot of times because they started making really good connections in the military. And as they make those connections with other individuals and other soldiers, their length of time in service actually extends. So when they go out of service and it's time for them to end their service time and they start kind of transitioning back into a civilian life, this is important for you to know because they're used to serving a higher purpose, they're used to being connected, and from the higher education standpoint, like, those are the things that you really need to focus on when working with service members, veterans, and their families, is making sure that they feel like they're still serving a higher purpose through whatever degree plan that they're choosing, making sure they're feeling connected to the classroom and to their other classmates and to the professors and into the organization as a whole. This is important because this is what has driven their service up to this point. This is going to be continuing it's going to be continuing the drive that they need to move forward in life, and that's being connected to a higher purpose, being connected to others, feeling supported, feeling like they have that in hand, and that they have someone that they can rely on. Because a lot of times in the military setting, you'll have what's called a battle buddy. Now, a battle buddy is somebody who sticks by you, who's by your side 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This person is your right hand, you're their right hand. You build a close relationship and a close bond with this person usually, and this somebody that you know constantly has your back. And this is a picture of my battle buddy. His name was Sergeant Chris Stewart. We served in just about every war tour, 3 different war tours that we went on together, and he was my battle buddy in each one. And my whole entire military career, it was myself and Chris Stewart. And I say that this is important for you, for somebody that works in education or even in a healthcare practice, or somebody just working with a service member and veteran. It's important to try to replicate this type of relationship. We're so used to understanding what it means to work in a team and to work as in close combination with others, that a lot of times we feel like we're in isolation when we leave service and we're trying to get education underway and we're trying to kind of create our civilian life for us. And what we need is to be able to have a battle buddy, somebody that steps up, that says, you know what, I am willing and able to come along with you on this journey. I'm willing to be here as a resource to you and as a guide to you. I'll have your back no matter what the case may be, and I want to make sure that you get everything you need and that your education experience is successful. My goal as I do this training is to be able to empower each and every person that works with service members, veterans, and their families to understand the importance of coming alongside somebody as a battle buddy and saying, hey, I've got your back. I'm going to be here for you. I'm going to be watching out for you. I'm going to be making sure that you have the services and resources you need to be successful in this setting. Why that's important is because that setting, that experience is going to be drastically different than what most people are used to that are coming out of service. Our worldviews, from the service member to a normal civilian, are dramatically different. Service members see things different. Their worldview is different. You look at this picture, and this picture is kind of symbolic of how our worldviews are different. When you think of a sandstorm, I'm sure that you think of dust and wind and all these things blowing, like kind of the Hollywood movie sandstorm. This is what a sandstorm looks like. This is not a filtered lens. This is actually what it looks like in the midst of a heavy sandstorm in Iraq. It turns blood red. Everything looks red. And I say that just because it's a good symbolistic kind of image of our worldview is different. Like, what you see as a sandstorm, what I see as a sandstorm. The reason that's important is because if you think about my worldview and the service member and veterans worldview, then you're talking about a lot of different things that play into how they're going to perceive and how they're going to interact with people in an education setting. So some of the things to realize is that a service member is taught to desensitize, and they're taught coping skills are kind of a joke. Like, you're taught coping skills. Coping skills are training. You're trained coping skills. And training is routine, so then coping skills become routine. You learn to deep breathe. You learn to keep control of your emotions to the best of your ability. But you also learn to desensitize. You desensitize yourself to things that others would probably never desensitize themselves to. You're kind of desensitized to life and to life and death conversations, and you're desensitized to understanding, like, you know what, I'm built to be a process. I'm built to be a machine. I'm built to do certain things that other people are not built to do, and I've been trained to do those things. I operate as a team member. I don't operate as an individual. That's important to think about in a classroom setting as well, because if that individual, if that service member and veteran is not connected to the bigger class, they don't feel like they're a member of the class, and they feel like they are an individual, they're going to feel isolated. They're going to feel withdrawn. They're going to feel like their voice is limited because they're used to operating in that member kind of concept. Everything is about the team in the military. Everything is mission critical. The end goal is the point. The end goal, like the mission, is all about everything that I do. Every assignment that I complete, everything that is about the end goal. I'm not focused on this one particular task. I'm focused on the end goal and what I need to do to get to that end goal. So everything becomes mission critical. Trauma is viewed differently. A lot of times people will come into class and they'll talk about their experience and how their girlfriend or boyfriend broke up with them and how they're so traumatized about it. And a service member a lot of times will be annoyed by these type of conversations because they're not concerned about pens and paper and making sure that life clicks just as like a normal civilian's life would. But they're like, you know what? I've a lot of times they've had to face life and death firsthand. So their view of trauma and things that are important are a lot different than somebody who's coming out of 12th grade and going into their 13th grade and kind of having that first year college experience. So what you'll see is a lot of times service members and veterans getting annoyed by their classmates because they're like, okay, your worldview is completely different than mine. Like, I've had to deal with some stuff. I've had to face with life and death, and you're sitting here worried about getting A's on every single paper that you write. Some other things is weakness is not shown. This is kind of end-all be-all for military. Weakness is not shown. You're not going to know if they're struggling a lot of times with unless someone asks them or talks to them directly and asks directly about what's going on in their life. Weaknesses are not shown. We train until things are routine. We live with high amounts of adrenaline and cortisol. So if you have somebody in a classroom setting for an hour and you start to see that they're getting antsy and that they're having a hard time sitting still, well, imagine that especially if they've been on a deployment of any kind, they've lived with almost a year's worth of 24/7 adrenaline and cortisol running through their body. Your body doesn't naturally just come off of those things that quickly. So if they're coming out of service and they've been on a deployment anytime recently and they're going back into the classroom, they're going to have high amounts of adrenaline and cortisol. They're going to be a little antsy in their classroom. They're going to have a hard time sitting still. Military service members are meant to stay in their lane. We're taught to stay in our lane. We're taught that everyone stays in their lane. We're taught that teamwork requires everyone. We also are taught that we serve a higher purpose, achievement matters, and that we respect and honor that it's earned and it's not just given. And a lot of times we, like civilians, I feel like have this concept that a service member, like they're dedicated, they're loyal, they're structured, they understand hierarchy and rank, and that they fit into most machines very well. And I would beg to differ that fact, because a lot of times what we're taught is we are taught to do our job and to do our job extremely well, and we know what our job is, but that job is clearly defined, and we see how that job influences everybody else's job. So you're taught not just your job, but the bigger system and why your job is important to the bigger system. When you go into a civilian type of setting, especially for employment and things like that, things that really matter is if I go to Office Depot and I have a manager that's micromanaging me, then I'm going to tell them to go get back in their lane. Like, I'm an expert at what I do. You train me to do my job. Let me do my job, and you go and stay in your lane and let me stay in mine. So a lot of times you'll see that employment issues and things like that come up because we are taught to stay in our lane, but we're also taught to deal with things directly. And a lot of times those things don't transfer over real well into normal, typical employment or education settings because we're not not known to filter our opinions a lot of times, and that we'll just tell people to take a hike when we feel like they should. We start to understand that service members have their own worldview. It's also important to understand why we should hear their story. And hearing their story is a key element to making sure that we can come alongside a service member, veteran, and their family and really provide the best resources and care possible from any setting, because this allows us to hear their pain points. This allows us to direct whatever things that they need. We can direct them to the right places and the right people to make sure that those needs are met. Members come home and they've been overseas, they fought in wars, or even if they've just gone through basic and their advanced training and things like that, or boot camp, depending on what service they're in, and they come back, like, they have stories to tell, but their families don't know how to relate, and their friends don't know how to relate, and they notice there's something massively different about this person that wasn't there before. It's because their worldview's changed, and a lot of times families and friends are really uncomfortable asking those type of questions, but it's really important to understand, to hear their story. Understand where they're coming from, understand what they're dealing with, and realize that what they're dealing with may not be the typical issues that you think of. A lot of times when we think about military and service members and people going overseas, we automatically put post-traumatic stress or traumatic brain injuries in play, and that may not be their experience at all. A lot of times we find, especially with someone's considering suicidal ideations or behaviors, that what they see is that those family issues, substance abuse, not deploying or deploying. So what's interesting is that we go through a massive life change when we start getting ready for deployment. You start getting ready for a deployment, and then your unit gets stood down, which means that your unit is told that they're not going all of a sudden. And all of a sudden you'd shifted your job and your living situations and everything for you to be gone, and now you're staying. And you have to kind of go back to figuring out, why is that? How do I get back to my normal life after making all these massive changes for me, planning on going overseas? Or they might be planning on deploying and they get to their MOB site, which is their mobilization area before they go overseas, and they realize that they're not medically qualified. And now that they have to come back and they have to explain to all their friends and family that they weren't able to go because of some kind of medical issue. So there's a lot of guilt and shame with that a lot of times that come with not being able to deploy when they thought they were. A lot of times they struggle with finance issues. Like, military service members make a decent amount of money, but a lot of times they're not taught financial skills, so they find themselves in financial crisis a lot of times. There might be prior crisis and trauma to their military. So before they ever got into the military, they may have prior crisis and trauma experiences that are playing into some of the things that they're dealing with in the classroom setting. And now it's just kind of not just comorbid, but it's also complexed, because now you have the military stuff that goes on top of the prior crisis and trauma. A lot of times they have work-related issues, health-related issues, and every now and then, I mean, you have a percentage that really do have post-traumatic stress issues and traumatic brain injury issues, or a moral injury, which is a moral, ethical, or spiritual break on something that they've done, something that has been done to them, or something they've been a part of that creates a moral, ethical, or spiritual break in who they are. So a lot of times when we're dealing with this in a classroom setting or an education setting, a lot of times people think, well, it's mental health driven. A lot of times it's just normal life driven stuff that they haven't had to deal with before. So if you have been in service since you're 17 and you're getting out now and you're 24 and you're going into college for the first time or to tech school for the first time, then what you realize is that these people, these individuals, especially if they were active duty, their housing has been paid, their meals have been paid for, their clothing has been paid for, and this is their first time to have to really actually step into a civilian world where they have to take care of those kind of life factors on their own, and they're stressed out because they don't know necessarily how to deal with a lot of it. So unless you've been there, you don't understand. All military beats to a different drum. The worldviews are dramatically different, and you just don't know if you haven't experienced it. And you see this a lot when service members come back. They're afraid to talk to somebody because they're like, unless you've been there, you just don't understand. Like, there's no words I can express to put into to put it in a way that you might understand what I've experienced. Because one, I'm afraid that I might traumatize you if my experiences have been difficult, but also, like, you just don't know unless you've been there. And it's really tough to be able to break through that, but the way you break through that is somebody who's coming along them to be an influencer is just be like, hey, I'm here, I've got your back, I want to know your story, not because I want I want to relive it with you, but I want to know it so I can better have an understanding of what you need and how I can help. And if you approach it like that, you're going to win every time. But also understand that every service member's experience is dramatically different. You have those that have actually gone overseas and fought in wars. You have those who experienced the battle and that have been on the front lines. And then you have different segments of military, like 80s, 90s, unless they went to Desert Storm or somewhere. A lot of times they didn't have a wartime experience, and most of their experience was training based. So you see a lot of this difference in like World War II, Vietnam versus the peace period or down period where there were no deployments through the 80s and 90s, and then coming into the 2000s, now you have the modern war. So all these experiences are different. Somebody that went to Vietnam and came home's experience is dramatically different from somebody who went to Iraq and Afghanistan and came home. The way the culture and the community supported them is different. So what you have are those also that have experienced major loss during their military service. And this is difficult for a lot of people. They've lost friends and battle buddies and loved ones and people that they would consider their own brothers and sisters that they've served with. And this is experience, even if you're working with somebody else who's gone through a war experience, there's nothing like losing somebody on the battlefield. That's an experience all to itself. And so their experience is extremely different. And without hearing their story, you're not going to know the pain points in which to be able to help. But the goal is to come alongside them to be that person that can establish hope and connection. And establishing hope and connection looks like being a person that's willing and able to say, you know what, I want to hear your story so I can see what you're moving towards. I can be hopeful with you in your future. I can connect you to the right people and to the right resources, and I can be here as somebody who's got your back, somebody that you can trust and that you can rely on as you go through your education experience. And that means that you're becoming that connector and that influencer. And being a connector and influencer is big in working in this world and working with service members, veterans, and their families. Because being a connector and influencer is meaning that you're willing and able to step into that person's experience to reignite their purpose, to connect them to others, to build a safety net, to collaborate with local resources, to be a team member, and to use best practices in your facilities. To ignite their purpose, when they come home from being a part of the military service and they're kind of rejoining or even joining for the first time their communities, a lot of times they need to ignite their purpose. They've been serving a higher purpose their whole entire life, and all of a sudden now they feel like, you know what, I don't know exactly what the direction has. I'm not connected to my team who I've been connected to through all these years. I've always been serving a higher purpose in the military, and is my job at Office Depot really serving a higher purpose? So it's igniting them to their purpose, igniting them to the education and what future, the possibilities that they have with what they're trying to accomplish through their education, and then building a safety net around them, knowing those local resources, collaborating with those local resources and services, knowing how to connect them or who to connect them to directly, and then becoming a part of their team. And realizing that you become a part of that team, you also can really influence them by understanding that their friends and family are a part of their team. Be a team member and help them identify who's on their team. But then you also use best practices. And using best practices may look like zero suicide, might look like using, if you do mental health and counseling, using best practices like EMDR or CBT, and those kind of more clinical pieces. But then also, if you're not, like being trained in things like ASSIST, which is Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training, or QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer, which are suicide prevention and intervention skills trainings. And just having those best practices and tools that are on hand that you can use at any given moment. One of the best resources for that is connecting to the Oklahoma Governor's Challenge, which we're about to speak about. The Oklahoma Governor's Challenge is an effort that the state's looking at to reduce suicide among service members, veterans, and their families. It was developed out of a collaboration between the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the U.S. Department of Defense, as well as SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They started a grassroots effort to look at basically the kind of different parts of the nation that have high rates of service member populations as well as high rates of suicide. And then asking those different parts of the nation to be able to build a collaboration or the mayor's challenge or governor's challenge efforts in order to look at how we can reduce suicide among service members, veterans, and their families in those areas. We start building that out by looking at the different collaboration things that we need in the different sectors. So each community, each state is looking at their state and local government leadership, business and labor, state, county public health, primary health care, behavioral health care, education, social services, justice systems, and other different pieces that say, all right, how can we combine efforts and how can we streamline efforts with the different segments and different industries to really look at how we can come up with a comprehensive integrated suicide prevention strategy in our local communities. We do that by building out basically those local communities like the Tulsa Mayor's Challenge, Oklahoma City Mayor's Challenge, Lawton Mayor's Challenge, and then when it became a governor's challenge, we're looking at it from a state policyholder viewpoint of what can we do from the interdepartment agencies across the state to really streamline the different policies that are needed to reduce suicide in our communities as a whole. Some of the efforts that we're looking at, we developed 4 pillars of progress. One being providing positive pathways to hope. The second is how can we create ease of access to care and resources? How do we create the statewide policy changes that need to be in play? And then how do we create meaningful connection to resources and to other service members? So these pillars of progress are really kind of the pillars that hold up the foundation of what we're trying to do to reduce suicide amongst our service members, veterans, and their families. And then if we can create these 4 different pillars in each one of our communities, we're well on our way to be able to reducing suicide numbers as a whole. The way education plays into that is that it's a huge life factor. It's a huge protective factor that can create a positive pathway of hope, that can create ease of access to care and resources, that we can use education to look at statewide policy changes, and it helps us create meaningful connections. So education really plays into all 4 of these different pillars. Right now in the state, we're working on what's called the Oklahoma Veterans Corridor. That corridor connects basically the different major functioning cities for military populations across Oklahoma into accepting either the mayor's challenge or becoming a part of the governor's challenge as a whole. Right now, you can kind of see the shades. Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and Lawton are a darker blue. Those cities already have a mayor's challenge. So there's the Tulsa Mayor's Challenge, Oklahoma City Mayor's Challenge, and Lawton Mayor Challenge that are focusing on reducing suicide in their communities, which gives us kind of a corridor directly and a diagonal across our state. And then over the next couple of years, we're going to look at establishing a mayor's challenge for Enid, Altus, and McAllister, which is also 3 of our major military populations and installations here in the state. By doing this, it basically creates an opportunity for us to put service centers as well as mobile teams in those communities that can actually bring services and resources to the service members, veterans, and families in those communities in a risk-free and easy of access care, whether that be in one of the major cities or whether it be in a rural area that we can send a mobile team out to. So the Governor's Challenge and the Mayor's Challenge is going to be a huge resource across our state to being able to get services to our service members, veterans, and their families through telehealth, through direct care, through just building those social connections and supports where they have an individual or an organization within their communities they can go to be a one-stop service for whatever their needs are or whatever resource they need. As tech school, if you'd be more inclined to getting some more information about the Governor's Challenge or Mayor's Challenges in your communities or starting one in your community, feel free to contact myself. I run the Oklahoma Governor's Challenge. Again, this is my name with my contact information, my cell phone, my office phone, as well as my email address. So if you want to become a part of the Governor's Challenge, please feel free to reach out. Now we're going to move into understanding our military education benefits. This is where my friend and colleague, Dr. Brent Montgomery, picks up, and he's going to talk to you for just a few minutes through this video about education benefits and how we can best serve our military service members and veterans and their families. So now that we've gone over education benefits, let's talk a little bit about resources in our communities. And being able to build that safety net that we talked about a little bit earlier, and kind of knowing the different resources that are around. And the first one is just the Oklahoma Department of Veterans Affairs. That's who I work for and who runs the Oklahoma Governor's Challenge, as well as who Brent Montgomery, who you just heard from Education Benefits, he works for as well. So as you can see, we have quite a few references and resources to the Oklahoma Veteran Registry, to claims and benefits for the VA. We have nursing home facilities across the state for our service members and veterans who are aging, as well as mental health and suicide prevention resources, women's veteran resources, and education resources. So we're a good one-stop for anything across the state that has to do with veterans. If we don't have an answer for you, we can point you in the direction of a resource or a contact that we know of that might be able to answer your question regarding service members, veterans, and their families. Another resource is the Oklahoma Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. The ODMH SAS, they are the mental health and substance abuse experts in the state of Oklahoma, as well as they do suicide prevention, mental health education, and they have tons and tons of resources with regards to that as well. We have the Oklahoma Military Department, who runs the National Guard resources for the state. They have family programs development there, as well as behavioral health, substance abuse, and suicide prevention programs. They have sexual assault programs. So this really is a good resource for our guard and reserves. They have a lot of ability to speak into the different programs that affect service members from the Air National Guard and Army National Guard side. You have the Department of Veterans Affairs, who deal with health care, mental health care, as well as education. You have the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA. They're a national resource for mental health and suicide prevention. Building Healthy Military Communities. This is a good friend of mine. Her name's Debbie Rich. She is the Oklahoma coordinator for Building Healthy Military Communities, which is called BHMC. They run under family programs underneath the Oklahoma Military Department, but she's also a resource to every branch of military, not just the Army National Guard or Air National Guard. BHMC really is a resource for all things health-wise regarding military communities. She's got tons and tons of helpful and insightful resources across the state, and good contacts as well if you're looking for something more specific. There's the Mental Health Association of Oklahoma. They're a nonprofit here in Oklahoma. They have a variety of programs for housing, mental health, advocacy, healthy family, suicide prevention. This association has really tons and tons of resources for a lot of different social services. They're easy to contact. They're a state agency, or not a state agency, sorry, but a nonprofit that is statewide. So they have different phone numbers per the different cities that they're in, and you can always look their information up there at their website. There's the Community Service Council. They're mainly based out of Tulsa, but they're also kind of expanding across the state right now. They have a variety of programs that cover most support services and social services that you can think of that are tied to the United Way. So they have a lot of different resources in that capacity. They also have a lot of veteran-specific programming that allows you to be able to connect to them through 211 and Heartline out of Oklahoma City. There's tons of resources there for veteran-specific that fall under the Community Service Council. Psych Armor Institute is a great online resource, great resource and tools for all things veterans, really. Like there's training, there's education, there's videos, there's handouts that you can print off. Psych Armor has a lot of good information that's on their website, and really underneath just about any category you could think of for helping a service member or veteran with any kind of life factor or protective factor that can be put in place. Cognito, Oklahoma is a good resource for education academic settings. This is a suicide prevention interventions training. They have handouts, resources, training that you can do online. This is ran through ODMH SAS, which we talked about just a few minutes ago. Cognito is a great kind of online portal for staff and faculty to be able to get prevention and intervention training in academic settings. So this is K through 12 as well as higher education training, and they have different segments for each one, so it's definitely worth checking into. We talked a little bit about best practices earlier. Zero Suicide Institute is a best practice for suicide prevention in education organization settings, and so they focus on basically making sure that an organization is, as a whole, culturally focused on suicide prevention and the culture around suicide prevention, making sure that we can reduce suicide to the point that there's zero suicides within those organizations. So this is organizational training. So this is for nonprofit, profit, state agency, education agency, you name it. These guys can go into just about anywhere and teach organizational change to be more suicide prevention focused, and how we can really focus in on that prevention intervention piece. You have Military One Source, which is a lot like PsychArmor. They're an online resource. We have Trey Bruce is our representative here in Oklahoma. He's a great connection to resources for a variety of different veteran programs. Military One Source has programs for just about everything. And again, it's a good, not just for mental health, but for practical, everyday life type of things. If you want to learn a language, you want to learn music, things like that, Military One Source has a variety of programs for different types of stuff. Scars and Stripes Coffee is a great employment opportunity here in Oklahoma, ran by some local veterans out of Oklahoma City. Scars and Stripes really focuses on teaching somebody that's transitioning out of military service into a civilian life, really how to start their own business, how to own their own business, and they team up with Scars and Stripes Coffee. They can start their own coffee distribution, and they get a percentage of whatever their sales are. So it's kind of a commission-based sales, but it teaches them how to kind of continue to be a part of that social connection team and be a part of the military kind of concept, because the way that Scars and Stripes is built out is really kind of kept that military framework as far as leadership development is wise, but it also gives them an opportunity to have a direct-to-hire type of system for income when they're transitioning. So it's a great opportunity for employment coming out of the military. Coffee Bunker is a good resource for the Tulsa or northeastern Oklahoma region. They're a transition assistance center that focuses on local resources and events. They're big on family programming as well. Have a lot of tons of resources in the Tulsa community, but really good about helping veterans and making sure that they have all the resources that they need and that they know what's in the community. Eagle Ops is another organization that's really good. They're all about reaching one more. This is more of a social connection, social event type of organization, similar to like maybe an American Legion or a VFW. Eagle Ops is another statewide organization that is doing a lot in the social connection piece, making sure that, hey, you know what? We're here about connecting, but we're going to reach one more. We're going to connect another service member to what we're doing. They have great events such as different types of firing range days, golf nights, fire pit nights, 5K runs. They do all kinds of stuff, which is really fun, and they have a lot of different connection points and a really good mission across the state of Oklahoma. You have the Whitcock Foundation. If you want an outdoor experience, so if you are working with someone that wants a hunting or fishing type of experience, it's a great organization, great foundation to be in a connection with for those outdoor experiences and family type of experiences. You have Veterans for Life, which is they're about providing purpose and support to treatment. So if you're needing somebody who needs a physical treatment or mental health treatment of some sort, this is a great connection point for you. NAMI, which is a mental health programs education facility. They're a national program, but they also have state programming as well. And NAMI, Oklahoma is really good and really big in a lot of communities across Oklahoma who help with mental health programs and education. You have Suicide Prevention Resource Center. They are helping finding care and resources and services for suicide prevention. Two of the things that you really need to take note of are number 20 and 21, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline and the Veterans Crisis Line. You'll notice that the number is the same. You just press 1 for the veterans. But this is basically if you know somebody that's struggling with suicide prevention and they're not comfortable with talking to a mental health provider at this point, connecting them to the Suicide Prevention Lifeline is a great resource. You can go online for some resources, but you can also just call that direct lifeline. And if you press 1, it gives you the veteran-specific crisis line and gets them connected to different service organizations in their communities that are veteran-specific. You have the National Institute of Mental Health, who's good with data and information sources. So if you need data or information for mental health types of things, It's a great resource. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention has a lot of resources, a lot of handouts, a lot of volunteer opportunities, information for suicide prevention. And then lastly, the USO, which is one of the longest lasting veteran service organizations in the United States. The USO has a variety of programs, events, and social opportunities. They're based out of, the Oklahoma version is based out of Lawton, but they're across the state all the time doing different events, so it's really good just to connect with them and find out what's going on with the USO here in Oklahoma as well. So as we kind of come to a close, we want to ensure follow-up care, and follow-up care is both a prevention and postvention effort. Follow-up care is making sure that after we do resource a service member, veteran, or their family member to some kind of service, that we're following up and making sure that they feel connected and that the resource was appropriate for whatever they were looking for. There's a lot of issues with looking at how we connect, how a service member or veteran connects to different resources. You can read through some of these common issues here. There's eligibility issues, lack of participation, criteria, are we asking the right questions, access, are there enough providers, are they within the hours of availability that a service member or veteran may need, is there funding issues, do they carry the right insurance, do they not have insurance. There's just tons and tons of different issues with finding services, a lot of obstacles that veterans a lot of times kind of encounter. And the point for this is really just, if we're going to do good follow-up care, this is the point of follow-up care, making sure that the resource that we provided really worked out for that service member and veteran, and that they're still not in need and they're just not saying anything. So following up, checking in on them, asking if the resource was adequate, if they got what they needed, or if they needed another referral to something else. But good. This is where postvention comes into play and prevention comes into play, because if we have good follow-up care, then we're following these four things, these four steps. And that's follow-up is prevention. If we're following up, we're keeping people, making sure that they have the resources and care that they need, whether that's external to our facility or maybe it's just internal to the tech education center that you work at. Like what do they need? Do they need a quieter test setting? Do they need a one-on-one with their instructor to be able to walk through a process or to really grab a hold of an idea or concept that was being taught that they couldn't? Do they need tutoring? So these are the types of things, but we might offer these, and then if we don't ever follow up, we don't ever know if they're really if it met the need. And this is where the prevention piece comes in, because the way we keep people from going into suicidal ideations, thoughts, or behaviors is making sure that on the front end that they're feeling connected and they're feeling like they are connected to the higher purpose as well as connected to the organization as a whole. We also want to provide warm handoffs, so if we are going to refer them out to somebody else, or we want them to be able to go out into the community and into a specific resource or service, we want a warm handoff. We want to know who's on the other end of that resource, or that we can say, all right, hey, here is our service member or veteran. They're looking for ABC resource, and here's Jane over at ABC resource. We want to connect them to Jane and give them a warm handoff and make that introduction. That way, it's more warmth, it's more caring, it's more. It feels like we're coming alongside of them versus just kind of throwing them out to the wolves and allowing them to kind of fend for themselves out there for whatever resource that we're connecting them to. Carrying contacts is another option. Carrying contacts are basically writing a small letter, dropping in on a class, just making a connection point that says, hey, we just wanted to contact you, we wanted to make a connection, make sure that what resources, or if everything's just going okay, maybe we're just checking in for the day and making sure that you're doing all right. But making a caring contact, writing a letter and letting them know that they're being thought about, and that you hope that whatever resource you provided was a good connection for them, and if not, that they can get a hold of you and your contact information and get a hold of you again. And then that's really, like, as we do that, we're creating a postvention plan, and that postvention plan is really kind of that end-all be-all of, are we making sure that after someone has had a suicidal thought, after somebody is asked for a resource or needed something, or they've had to be referred out for behavioral health or mental health or physical or social connection, or whatever the case, what is our postvention plan? Are we doing something? Do we have a plan to follow up? Do we have a plan to make sure that these people are being taken care of the way they should, and that they have the resources that they need? So all these things combined, and we can get more in depth if you guys want one-on-one training. I'd be more than willing to come out to your facility and help you kind of look through each one of these pieces to identify how you can do better in each one, and then what you're doing, and just be a connection for you. With that being said, this kind of concludes our instruction for today. I want to thank you for spending some time with me. I want to make sure that you have my contact information if you have any questions, concerns, ideas, or best of all, if you have vision, if you have something that you want to see accomplished within your tech education center that is not being done and that I can help with, feel free to contact me. This is my direct number. It's my cell phone, 918-557-8789. And if you want to join the Governor's Challenge, if you want to join the Governor's Challenge, feel free to reach out through email, aaron.ashworth@odva.ok.gov. And we want to make sure that all of our tech centers across Oklahoma have the education and resources and the services they need to be the best that they can be for our service members, veterans, and their families that are out there. So I wish you guys a good day, blessings, and we'll talk to you soon.